I'm Thomas from Meaningful Gigs, and welcome back to another episode of Heroes of the Creative Revolution. In this episode, I sit down for a conversation with executive design leader Doug Powell about how to run DesignOps at scale. He takes reference from his time at IBM to discuss how he unified design standards and practices across continents, data's important role in establishing trust across teams, and much more. Let's dive in. Hi, Doug. Thanks for coming on the show today. It's great to have you on. Our viewers are really interested in hearing what you got to say about DesignOps at scale. Let's just start off pretty simple and just, I'm really curious about your origins into the DesignOps world. How'd that come about?
Well, first of all, thanks, Thomas. Thanks for the invitation. Excited for this conversation. I think, as far as origin story, I think of maybe the last decade or so of my career. I mean, I've been in design for over 30 years, long before DesignOps really became a thing. But really in the last 10 years or so, both DesignOps has emerged as a practice and as an important sort of component of building scale design programs. And my career has kind of focused in that area as well. I look back to, we're in 2023 right now. I look back 10 years to 2013, and I had just joined IBM. Big global company, global tech company in 2013. They were on the cusp of launching a new sort of renewed global design program. Big aspirations to grow the team to hundreds, even thousands of designers, and this was a time in 2013 again. The word DesignOps, the idea of DesignOps really just hadn't, I don't even think those words had come out of our mouth yet. And the idea also of scaling design programs to the degree that we were envisioning at IBM really hadn't happened at that level at all, really. I mean, we were looking around, trying to find the models, trying to find others who had done what we were trying to do at that time, and there just weren't any. So as we got, a few years into that journey, and I was at IBM for almost 9 years, as we got a few years into that journey, that program started to get to a scale where we had multiple teams doing similar things all over the company, all over the world. And that need really emerged for us to think systematically, for us to think about how do things happen in a very consistent way across this company, and how do we know they're happening consistently? How do we measure that consistency and the value of that consistency? That is really where the need for a more serious approach to operations came into the picture. Hence, DesignOps. Now, that was probably in the sort of 2016 or so range, and I don't know exactly when the term DesignOps actually was coined. I'm sure one of your earlier guests on the show, Dave Maloof, has the answer to that, because he might have been the one to coin the phrase. But I'm pretty sure it was right around that time, 2016, 2017, kind of in that time frame, where a lot of companies, not just IBM, but a lot of companies were at that point where they needed to get more serious about it. And so the conversation started across the industry. People started comparing notes. Hey, what are you guys doing over there? We've got some problems over here that we need to address. And DesignOps really emerged very quickly in those years as a core practice that was an essential piece of these scale programs.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Yeah. Makes sense. I think you're right. I think it was around like 2016. It's funny like how you started doing the work before the field even exists, but out of necessity comes the invention, right? So
Right.
wonderful. So, we're talking design ops at scale. So I would love to dive into your experience at IBM in particular. And curious, what steps did you take to really stand up design ops within such a large organization?
Well, it was very interesting because the way and we were dealing with thousands of designers. The original sort of target number that we thought we were shooting for was about 1,000 designers globally at that company starting in 2013. Well, by the time I left, we were well over 3,000 designers. So we went way beyond that. Just to give you a sense of scale, those designers, of course, were working in teams. So there were hundreds of design teams across the company. Now, the challenge at IBM that was somewhat unique is that IBM has both product businesses, so software product businesses, much like the big tech companies that we're all familiar with, Google, Amazon, Meta, etc., Microsoft. And it also has a huge consulting business that is more structured like an Accenture or a Deloitte or a Sapient kind of, client-facing work. So the way design is happening in each of those parts of the business is very different. And that meant that the way that design ops emerged was not a single way. It was happening in different ways in different parts of the company, which for me as a leader was fascinating, right? That's cool because we've got kind of this laboratory of design ops in this big company, and there are probably 20, 25 different sort of permutations, dialects of design ops that are happening across the company. But it's also challenging because, how do you create a program and how do you codify the practice when it's happening in so many different ways? So there were pros and cons to that reality. The way that we approached it was to really go to the community, go to the practitioners, those people on those teams out in the business who were, in some cases, they knew they were doing design ops and they were calling it design ops and they were calling themselves design ops leaders or design ops practitioners in some way. But many of these folks were doing design ops and they didn't even know. And so the first task became like, let's almost do a census across the company and find out where design ops is happening and who is doing it. And once we got to that level where we kind of had a basic, sort of baseline understanding, then we could go out to that community and say, okay, what are the patterns here? Okay, here are a bunch of teams that are kind of doing it in a similar way. Okay, here's some consulting teams over here. They've got a different approach, but there's some patterns here that we can detect and we can kind of start forming some groupings. And ultimately, that kind of came together, that community kind of came together and drafted the original sort of point of view for design ops at IBM. They created a playbook. It was a very inclusive process. It was very community driven, very grassroots. So the exercise for me as a leader was, how do we set up an environment where all of these people could come together. We had monthly calls, community calls, where we were rallying them together. How could we include their voices? And how could we get them all involved in sort of the original draft of that playbook. That was really what my job was, to create that environment and to create that space for those experts out in the field to kind of come together and share their expertise with each other.
And I guess along with that, DesignOps, you're absorbing change, you're implementing change. What were some of the challenges that you faced, or even like maybe resistance when you were first at that inflection point of identifying DesignOps is happening, we're going to formalize it and roll it out at a mass scale at IBM or wherever?
I think it was really getting people to feel comfortable coming together, and even though there were people that they were coming together with who were doing very different things, and for them to see the value in that sharing of expertise, that sharing of best practices. Sometimes that comes very naturally, but if you don't know somebody and you're kind of coming together and you don't have that trust, that trust that's so important in big companies, and you're being asked to come together and say, all right, tell us what you're really good at. Give us all your secrets. And you're like, wait a second, I don't know these people. Help me out here. So there was a little bit of just working with the community, just to get people to know each other, to trust each other, to build some key relationships that were across teams, in some cases across geographies. We had teams at IBM all over the world, a lot of them based in North America, but many in Europe, in Asia, many in China, and an emerging practice and population of designers in India, Asia Pacific, Australia, and New Zealand. So, a lot of cultural kind of, not conflict, but just working through some of those cultural differences to build that trust. It's it sounds maybe a little obvious, or it sounds maybe not super glamorous, but that's really oftentimes what needs to happen before you can get to anything else, is just getting people to trust each other.
How have you traditionally been able to establish trust between the design team and other departments? And then if you could speak to some of the benefits of that trust, or even the consequences when it's not there, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big theme of all of my time at IBM. As I said, in 2013, we were starting from almost zero, not exactly zero. There were designers at the company at that time, but very few comparatively. And there was no connection between the designers. There was no common practice of design. Nobody really, the designers were kind of scattered around the company, and there was no organization, and there certainly wasn't a culture of design at the company. So here we come in 2013 with this big new mission, and we're gonna bring design to IBM, and there was almost no one in the company at that time who really wanted design, to be honest with you. Like they were like, yeah, what are you doing here? So even though we were really the design team and the leaders, my peers on that original team, we were really enthusiastic about it. We saw a a big win for the company, and we saw lots of potential and all this stuff. When we would start interacting with different parts of the company, they would just, at best be sort of, like ambivalent, and at worst a little antagonistic, like, wait a second, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about this company. You don't know about the technology that we're building. And you don't know about the competitive landscape that we're in the midst of and all of the pressures that we have. And so we really had to break that down and just kind of get through that and get people comfortable with why we were there, what we were doing, why it could help them do their jobs better, and ultimately how they and the company could have success with it. So that was just a core challenge to the whole mission that we had at IBM. What the DesignOps practice, one of those common patterns of the DesignOps practice was that as I said, it helped us do things consistently across the company. So there was, we began to put some models, some frameworks, some documentation. We began to measure the activities of design teams in a more consistent way, and that's part of how you build that trust. So then you can start having a conversation with those cross-functional stakeholders that design is always interacting with, and you can have that conversation based on data and based on real quantifiable evidence that the design team is doing important work. And so that's where DesignOps really kind of became essential to us. It, again, we didn't always call it DesignOps because DesignOps was just becoming a thing. But as I reflect on it, even very early on, we were doing DesignOps before we were calling it DesignOps.
Your perspective now, if you were to talk to yourself earlier on when you were just starting DesignOps back, you said 2013, what advice would you give to yourself?
I think we didn't start measuring those activities, those core activities of the design teams early enough in that journey. We had a lot going on. I mean, we were building that whole thing, and we were bootstrapping it. So, I give us a lot of grace. As I remember those early days, there was just a lot going on. Literally every day we were kind of making it up. We had hundreds of new designers starting at the company every year. So just that integrating of designers coming in and getting them integrated into the company was a huge, huge undertaking. Recruiting, onboarding, integrating, all of that. So what we didn't have, and I wish we had early on, was that we would have been measuring some of those core activities at a very early stage back in 2013, 2014, because then we would have had such an important baseline, and we could kind of rewind the tape a little bit and manufacture some of that in retrospect, but it wasn't as accurate and it wasn't as compelling as if we would have had it, from day one. And so, that would have been, from a storytelling point of view, to be able to say, all right, this is what was actually happening in 2013 when we started. And here, every year, every quarter, here's how we improved. And here's how it impacted the business. That would have been super compelling. We got there eventually, so that, later in the program, we were able to tell that more clearly. But, early on, I think we just had our eye on other balls that were in the air at that time.
Yeah, I'm sure you're busy just trying to do at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk fun for a moment. What's the most fun you've had within design operations?
Oh, fun design ops. I think getting to know the global community. I've had the opportunity to speak at a couple of the great design ops conferences over the last few years. It was mostly pre-pandemic, but the energy around the global community. I mean, you all are speaking to some of these great leaders who are doing great work, and when that community comes together, there is just so, everyone's just trying to help each other be better, and really trying to just learn. I mean, we're all so it's all so new that there's still so much for us to figure out. So for me, getting together with that community and getting to know these great folks, sharing ideas, sharing best practices, that's really great. That's really super fun.
Who in the design ops space do you admire and draw inspiration from?
One of your earlier guests, Dave Maloof, is one of the key leaders who has been around. And as I said earlier, I can't say this authoritatively, but I'm pretty sure if it wasn't Dave Maloof who said it first, then he was probably second or third to talk about design ops in those terms and to use those words. So I love Dave. He's doing great work. One of my former colleagues at Expedia, Kristen Skinner, is just an absolute guru in this space. She's kind of got one of those like operational minds that's kind of like next level. She's far beyond, from really understanding design ops in a deep way. She's just so beyond certainly where I am, and I think she's just pioneering a lot of practices in the industry. She, in fact, co-authored one of the great design ops books, which is Org Design for Design Orgs, with Peter Merholtz, who's another great leader in the space. So Kristen and Peter co-authored that book, which, for your viewers and listeners, if you haven't read that book, it's super consumable and super just informative. I mean, it's kind of like the Bible for design ops, so I would highly recommend that. And as I said, Kristen is just delightful and one of the real clear thinkers on design ops.
Lastly, can you tell us, I know you have your own design leadership podcast, and I just want to give you a little time to talk about that and tell us what that's about.
Yeah, this has been a great project for me. It's called This Is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. And in each episode, I speak to two design leaders, and I kind of pair people up who don't know each other, who have traveled different journeys as designers and as leaders. And we really kind of go through and talk about that journey. We talk about how they found design to begin with, which is just almost always a fascinating sort of origin story. We talk about the people in their lives and in their careers who have opened doors for them, who have accelerated their path. We talk about the challenges that they've had along the way, and we've all had challenges because we're all doing this kind of, without a playbook, right? Without a roadmap. And we talk about how we have learned on the job, because we've all learned on the job. We've all had to figure out how to be leaders without being trained to do so. So how did that happen? I mean, how did you get into this role? It's usually a surprise, or it's unexpected in some way. And then you look around and it's like, I don't know how to do this thing. How do you get that? How do you figure it out? How do you do it? And that, for me, that is always there's always an interesting answer to that question. And so that's been a lot of fun, and it's just been delightful for me to reach out to some old friends, but also to just meet some new friends who many of whom I've not known before, and to bring them into that storytelling environment and just have a great conversation with them.
Great. Yeah, sounds like a fantastic program. Can't wait to check it out.
Yeah.
To see more episodes. We reached the end, so I just wanted to ask, anything else you wanted to say, plug anything, any message?
No, I just want to thank you and Ronnie for the invitation to come speak with you. I love that you're exploring this topic and doing so from a global perspective. I really think that I think that design can get a little provincial, and I certainly try to look beyond the artificial geographic borders that we happen to have around us, because I think that there's just really important work happening in design and design ops all over the world. And so that's part of what I love about what y'all are doing, and just grateful to be here and to have these conversations with you.